Welcome to Movie Recall. In today's video, we will be going through the 2014 movie Stonehurst Asylum. It's time to recall, let's get started, turn on subtitles, and spoilers ahead. The movie starts and we are taken to 1899 where a lecture is going on at Oxford University. We then go on to see a professor demonstrating a case of female hysteria, a beautiful woman named Eliza Graves, before his class, including a young man. Though the patient protests that she is sane, the professor points out that all mental patients claim to be sane. He goes on to touch the woman in an inappropriate fashion to trigger her hysteria. The woman does not like to be touched at all, so whenever she is touched, it ends up triggering her hysteria. When this demonstration is over, he goes on to tell his assistant to bring forth his next patient. The scene then changes and we see a man named Edward Newgate making his way to the Stonehurst Asylum. He happens to be a doctor. Mickey, the head of the guards, receives him at the gate and goes on to lead him to show him around the area. We then learn that this asylum has over 200 people and the majority of these people are from big families of Britain. They are lords and ladies from big families. Edward says that he has been sent to this place to strengthen his knowledge by doing things practically in this place. The evening that doctor has chosen to come is Christmas Eve. The affairs of this asylum are more or less watched over Dr. Silas Lamb, who goes on to introduce himself as the superintendent of this place. Edward goes on to tell him that he is going to work with the people who are mentally unwell, and the supervisor doctor is impressed and tells him that he is more than welcome to join him when he takes round in the afternoon. Dr. Edward is then introduced to many patients out there. It turns out some of those patients are just there because they turned out to be homos and their parents or loved ones of course could not stand it. Some patients are delusional and some of them just tend to think that they are animals. We then go on to see the same woman we saw at the start of the movie, Eliza Grave. She is introduced to Dr. Edward and the patient really grabs his attention. It is revealed that she is also from a noble family and her husband happens to be one of the richest men in the whole of Britain. She has been sent to the asylum so that she could be treated for the hysteria she tends to have. The woman cannot even stand a simple touch to her body. When her husband tried to touch her, she bit the man's ear off. She just lashes out whenever she is touched, and that is why her father sent her to the asylum. The woman, however, is very skilled when it comes to music, and Edward already seems to be fascinated by how good she is, and on top of that, she is also good-looking. They then go on to talk about how these patients are treated there, and Lamb's unorthodox methods surprise Newgate. Lamb says that he does not believe in drugging or incarcerating patients, and he encourages their delusions when he feels it will bring them greater happiness. He does not do anything whatsoever to help them out of their conditions, rather he is making them comfortable the way they are, and that is not at all good for them. Edward is well aware of the fact that this is going to do no good for these patients. Edward is then invited by Lambs over dinner. Edward makes his way to the dining area and when all of them are there, he is shocked when he realizes that the patients are also joining them on the dinner table. When Edward asks about this, Dr. Lamb goes on to tell him that it is good for the patients to get mixed with polite society. The dinner goes on and all is going well. However, Edward then addresses to a man named Mickey Finn, adding that it is a really funny name. All of them fall quiet for a moment and there is awkwardness and tension on the table now. Mickey, however, goes on to break the silence by laughing at the joke out loud. Dr. Edward is then poured some wine by Mickey, but when he is about to drink it, we see Eliza looking at his glass very closely. She goes on to kick him from under the table, making him spill the wine on his shirt. He is a bit startled, but before he is able to say anything, Liza tells him to go out with her so that she can clean his shirt. He agrees, and when they are out, the woman goes on to tell him to get out of this place as soon as he can, and Dr. Edward is bewildered to hear that. When he asks her why she is saying this, she does not give the man an answer. Edward goes to his room later that night and takes out his gun. He keeps it readied with him just in case something bad happens. He then hears a loud thud. The thud then changes into people making loud noises, and when he goes on to follow these noises using his torchlight, he comes across many imprisoned people who beg him to help them out. As he looks at them, he goes on to think that these patients must be mad or violent for that matter, but when he gets to talk to them, he realizes that he is talking to Lamb, it turns out. Lamb and Finn are actually patients. They were leading a revolt against the staff where they drugged their drinks and locked them all up. That is how the patients have been running things here. Among those prisoners stands the real superintendent of this place. His name is Dr. Benjamin Salt. Edward also goes on to see 2 nurses locked up and many other staff members, including a health guide too. They go on to tell him that they ended up drinking their regular drinks that had been drugged, and after that, they were brought down to the basement. This is when Edward goes on to realize that if he had drank the wine to be given to him by Finn earlier, he too would have ended up just like all the other staff members. He now realizes that Eliza may have saved his life. He right away goes to Eliza to tell her about what he just found out, only to learn that she is already aware of it. This is when she goes on to reveal that she herself helped Lamb to lock up the staff of the asylum. Edward decides to play along, and the next morning, Lamb goes on round with Mickey Finn, and Dr. Edward is also asked to join in. Lamb takes Edward to a very violent lunatic and tells him to change his dress. When Edward approaches the violent man, he is of course attacked. The man is very powerful, and he pins Edward against the wall. As he tries to make Edward pass out by choking him, Edward notices the name Arthur written on the wall. Edward goes on to say the man's name, and that is all it takes to calm him down. Lamb is impressed by that, but Edward is not too happy about it, because he suffers from a lot of injuries after the violent attack by a lunatic. Edward goes away, and later on, Eliza goes on to join him. She tends to his wound, and Edward tells her that he plans on freeing all the prisoners. Eliza is, however, not happy about that. She goes on to tell him that when all the original staff of this asylum was working, this place used to be hell for the patients. She tells him that Dr. Salt is actually a monster who used to conduct many experiments on the patients in this place, and some of those experiments are really cruel. It is revealed that Mickey, Finn, the other guards, and of course Lamb have been victimized by Dr. Salt. Eliza says that she has also been a victim of Salt's cruel methods of experimenting on the patients like they are animals. She reveals that the man used to touch her in a manner that is not appropriate at all. He said that he was trying to find a cure, but Eliza hardly thinks so. It is also revealed that he kept his patients under high-pressured running water for days, and it is the worst kind of torture. We learned that Dr. Salt's theory is that if he is able to find the worst fears of his patient, he might be able to cure them, and that is why he tortures them. It is revealed that he has still not been able to find Lamb's worst fear. Lamb is the one who was tortured the most, and when all the patients got sick of the torture, they started making plans to tackle it with the staff. They planned for months and then finally drugged them and imprisoned them. Lamb then assumed charge, and since then, all the patients have been allowed to roam freely. Eliza reveals that he assigned different works to all the patients. They now have a purpose in their lives, and it has been going really well for them. Edward is shocked to hear all this and promises Eliza that he will never let anyone torture her again. As time goes by, he starts getting along with others as well, and they start liking him. He goes on to feed a mother who has been refusing to eat because she wants her son to come back from the war. He pretends to be her son so that she could eat. Time goes by and Eliza starts getting infatuated towards him because he is really kind. Both of them are in love now, and Edward suggests that they run from the asylum, but Eliza is not too sure about that. One day, Lamb goes on to call Dr. Edward to his room where he has tied up Dr. Salt. He says that he is going to treat this lunatic because he says he is the superintendent of this asylum. Lamb says that he is going to give him electric shocks. He signals to this man to turn on the machine, and Edward looks on as Lamb goes on to give Salt heavy electric shocks. Edward is also told to give him electric shocks, and as Edward looks on, Dr. Salt goes into a critical condition, and it is revealed that he has also lost his memory after these shocks. Then comes New Year's Eve 1900. All the people in the asylum go on to celebrate the event. Edward decides that he is going to set all the prisoners free because he has had enough of it, as we go on to learn that Finn has killed a female patient who was just innocent and had done nothing wrong. Lamb, on the other hand, stands on the balcony as he sees all the others dancing and celebrating the New Year's Eve. Edward decides to go to the place where Lamb has been staying, and there he finds a picture. When everyone else is out to celebrate, Edward stays back and goes on to drug all the wine, which will make everyone who drinks unconscious. When he is doing it, he is caught in the act by Mickey Finn. A fight starts between the two, and Edward gets the upper hand. He beats him up, and after that, the wine is brought to the place where all the people are partying. Just as they are about to drink the wine, Finn shows up yet again and tells everyone what Edward has done. Lamb comes to Edward and goes on to hit him with a bottle. Edward passes out. When he opens his eyes, he finds himself tied to a stretcher, and it turns out he is being taken to the electrotherapy room. When Edward is about to be electrocuted, Eliza shows up. She goes on to find her picture in his pocket watch. This is when she suspects that Dr. Edward had actually been sent by her husband to get her from the asylum. She asks the man the real reason behind him coming to the asylum, and Edward goes on to reveal that he was in that lecture 6 months ago at Oxford University when she was demonstrated by a doctor in the class. He was one of the students, and that day, he decided that he was going to help Eliza get out of the asylum. Edward tells her that this is the only reason he came to Stonehurst. He tells her to get out of this place before he is taken to the therapy room. Just as he is about to be electrocuted, he goes on to tell Lamb that he has a final request, and Lamb grants him that. Edward goes on to tell him to see a picture of Eliza that Edward keeps in his pocket. When the picture turns out to be one of Lamb's victims, the shock causes Lamb to stagger out of the room in a daze. It is then revealed that Lamb actually used to be a real doctor, but one day he had to treat some soldiers. They had fatal wounds, so he shot them dead. However, the guilt got to him and he tried killing himself too, but ran out of bullets. This is when he went mad. Finn attempts to take control, but Eliza shows up and a fight starts between Finn and Eliza. He triggers her hysteria, but Edward manages to calm her down. Finn ends up getting electrocuted and burns to death. All the others are now with Edward and Eliza because they are sick of the violent behavior of Lamb and Finn. Edward then makes his way out to look for Lamb while Eliza goes to free the prisoners. Edward finds Lamb in the hallway. The man is going out of his mind. Edward takes him out where all the other patients are present too. All of them are safe now. The prisoners have been freed and Edward wants Eliza to be with him, but she says that she cannot be with him because he is normal. Edward says that he is not normal as he is in love with her and has a secret to tell her. The scene then changes to a few months later. Eliza's husband and the earlier Oxford professor arrive to be greeted by Timms, now the new gatekeeper. The professor asks for Eliza's release, but Mrs. Pike, the nurse, says that Edward already released her. The Oxford professor reveals that he is actually Dr. Edward Newgate, and the man they knew is an escaped mental patient with pseudologia fantastica. He is the same young man who was brought in front of the class when Eliza was being demonstrated. Upon hearing this, Lamb, playing chess with Salt, becomes amused and stifles a laugh in front of both visitors. Eliza and the imposter Edward are shown in Tuscany, Italy, where they are known as Dr. and Mrs. Lamb. The two dance happily and embrace in the garden of what appears to be another asylum, run peacefully by nuns, and with that, the movie comes to an end. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.